Hello to the LinkedIn Live community. I'm Christy Perrott from Thrive Recruitment Marketing, and I'm joined by my friends Katie Miller and Paul Sharp. And we are going to be talking about all things RPO today. RPO, recruitment process outsourcing. Probably most people who are watching in will know this. But really, we're going to be talking about anything about this kind of embedded model. And even more high level is just contingency recruitment. Is it, I posted something recently, is our iceberg melting? Do we need to be evolving as an industry to be more responsive to both what customers, our clients and candidates want, as well as just really both where the industry is going, as well as kind of the onslaught of all of the technology and automation and AI, and it's changing at record pace. So we wanted to bring this discussion to the wider world. And why don't I let each of you introduce yourselves? Paul, do you want to start?
No, I'll let Katie go. Her story is a lot more interesting than mine.
Perfect. Katie, over to you.
So hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm the Managing Director of Cummins Mellor and CJ UK. So that's two recruitment brands that work out of Blackburn in Lancashire. We've got two specialisms. CJ UK specialise in hospitality recruitment and Cummins Mellor specialise in local business support, finance and manufacturing. So we've got two different markets. And yeah, we've ventured into RPO recently, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later.
Fab. Paul, I think I'm in my 25th year now in the recruitment industry. So worked for some of the world's biggest agencies and brands and worked for an SME, and also had the unique opportunity of working in-house. So I've been one of those recruiters that have worked client side as well. And every year I usually get one or two little part-time gigs for organizations, helping them look at RPO as well. So my experience is a little bit unique in so much as I've worked on both sides of the fence and still continue to do so, which helps me enormously understand the pressures that agencies are under, but also why organizations do this, and equally the pressures they're under internally as well. So it's a nice, unique position to be in.
Brilliant. Well, that is the perfect segue. Why are we going this route, Paul? Why is RPO becoming so popular?
Well, I think what I'm about to say, I think will resonate with Katie to some degree, because Katie and I had these conversations going back to just when COVID were lifting. And I think some of those pressures are around today. So I think there's probably two things going on for me. I think first and foremost, in terms of what's happening in the recruitment industry, there's a lot of market pressure. Whilst everybody's saying, stay positive in terms of mindset, some sectors are struggling. Some agencies are continuing to struggle. And I think now is the right time to look at your services, your product offering. The permanent market is being continuous decline for a long time now. Hopefully that decline is slowing down, but it's still declining. We're seeing recruitment agencies struggle with cash flow pressures. So we know, according to our data, most agencies had 5 months cash in the bank 12 months ago. Now they've got 3. So people are eroding into the cash reserves because the industry is struggling a little bit. We know that people are struggling with organic growth and finding new markets. So that's a pressure as well. And contingency recruitment services, you quoted a stat recently, Christy, about, I think it was 20%, people are filling 20% of the roles that they get in, which means that they're working 80% of the time for no return.
Right.
So when you look at the energy and effort that's going in and the profit that's falling out at the bottom end, it seems a bonkers way of running your business. And I think the last thing that I'd just add is when you look at how much gross margin agencies are dropping to the bottom line, because they've got the cost pressure and labour cost intensity of running contingent services, it's actually not that profitable in most cases. And RPO can be a way to pivot, change, and become more efficient and certainly more profitable. So I think there's a lot going on in the recruitment industry. I think from an organisational perspective, a lot of organisations recently have trimmed their internal headcounts on internal recruiters. In some cases, they've grown exponentially as well. So organisations are under pressure to evolve and adapt. And in some cases, they can get that funding and investment internally, and in some cases they can't, due to shareholder pressure, as an example. So finding those opportunities in those clients that actually need the help is really important. So you have, in summary, got these two areas: that a challenge for recruiters in the recruitment industry, and a challenge for some organizations that need some external help.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a great segue for Katie to respond to the call, if this aligns with what prompted her to dip her toe in the space. But I'll just actually remind everybody watching in right now, if you comment in LinkedIn underneath where the comments are here, we'll be able to see them. So please share any questions, comments, and we'll share them, or we'll endeavor to share them over the course of the discussion and get some of those practical questions answered. So Katie, over to you. Is this what wooed you in to the market?
I mean, it's something that I've been aware of for some time, and we've always been predominantly a contingent recruiter. We work with clients when they come to us with a specific need, and we get paid if we fill the job, and that's still a large part of our business and a really important part of our business. But actually, the reason that we kind of dipped our toe in this world was because we were approached by a client, and I think it's quite important to point that out, because in my personal experience, I think one of the reasons that was holding me back exploring RPO was just kind of nerves around, can we actually do this? And it was only because someone kind of approached us and said, we really want to do it with you, that it pushed me into exploring, actually, okay, practically, how do we make this happen? What now we've done it, I'm absolutely thrilled that we've gone in that direction, and it's prompted us to, change our service offerings and repackage what we can do with clients. And we're doing so much more interesting work with a variety of different clients now. But I was definitely nudged into it, rather than I'm not going to claim that it was some huge strategic move that I professed that we needed to move into.
Katie, can I just ask, when we first met, just after COVID, and I mentioned RPO to you as something that maybe you might want to consider exploring, obviously you didn't listen to me. But what went through your mind when we first had this conversation about RPO?
I think if I'm really honest, I probably just felt like I'm not sure we would ever be able to do that. Yeah. We were a small business. Which clients would want to do this with us? How do you sell it? How do you deliver it? I was skeptical, I'll be honest. I think that was my very first impression. Obviously, that changed over time, but yeah, the first thought that I had was probably not sure that we would ever be able to pull it off, to be honest.
Yeah, you have a great quote that we've heard before, Katie, that it's what was it, imposter syndrome on steroids.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a bit of a tongue-in-cheek explanation of how I was feeling about going into this world, and I'm really honest about it, because I think a lot of people feel like that as well, because it is completely different to anything that we've ever done, and there was quite a lot of things to consider, and there was a lot of business implications, not to mention just the practical tactical implications of delivering this, but we got through it, and when you come through the other side of it, it's a huge confidence boost to keep pushing and do it again and do it again. So yeah, it was well worth the struggle. Although I thoroughly enjoyed the process anyway. So it was challenging work, but it was the most enjoyable work that I'd ever done in my career. So it was well worth powering through.
And you've now said that twice. I actually made a note. Interesting work with clients. I'd imagine both for you as well as your wider team. Dive into that. How is it different than from that contingency relationship? What kind of work, dare I say, consultancy, or are you offering there?
I think before I'd done this, I thought that I'd worked in partnership with clients, and I hadn't. It's just a completely different conversation. I think, the respect from the client for the work that you're doing is there from day one, because you're just working in a completely different way with them. And I know that, as recruiters, one of the things that we quite often get frustrated with is, we know the amount of work that we do for our clients, and we know how complicated and how skilled recruiters have to be good. And we don't always get the sense that that's appreciated with our clients. But I've never had that feeling when I'm working on this kind of RPO basis with a client, because they have a genuine need, and you're working on a project together in collaboration. You are working in partnership with them, so you get much more insight into the strategic direction of their business, and the relationships you build with the contacts within the client are incredible, because you are a team. So we've become so close with the contacts that we deal with and speak to them constantly, and it's a different level of relationship, and you do have to work hard at it, and there's got to be a lot of trust there, and you've got to be able to make mistakes together. But we were really transparent with the first client that we did it with, and we told them that it was the first time we'd ever done this, and we told them that from the start. So we weren't kind of pretending that we had all the answers and we were experts, but we kind of figured it out together, and that kind of level of vulnerability with a client I've never had before. But it's been incredibly rewarding, and it means that we've designed something that's completely bespoke to their business, but is, it's realistic for us to deliver. So yeah, it's been incredibly eye-opening.
Brilliant. I'm not sure if people can hear me. I've heard that I'm frozen. I am hearing everybody else. Paul, I'm going to let you jump on to the next question while I sort my computer out. But ultimately, what are some of these elements that companies need to be, baking into their offering to kind of resonate to what Katie was saying there?
I think Katie's point is a really good one, and we talk about relationships, don't we, a lot in recruitment and consultative selling and everything else. But the reality is, when you are a contingent recruiter, you are doing that part of a process that is that long, and that sometimes takes quite a mindset shift in terms of understanding probably bits of the service that you've done in the past, but you may not have done when you sort of join everything up. So I break this down into 5 key buckets, which starts with strategy, and then attraction's the second, sourcing is the third, selection, and then onboarding. So if you take and they aren't the only 5, by the way. I'm sure there's more, but they're the 5 ones that I have used and still use to today. And then breaking down the service that the customer needs under each one of those is really important. But what I would say is, if you've gone on a proper journey, this sounds really cheesy, right? But if you have gone on a journey with a customer and you really have done your due diligence, you've done your discovery audit, you've asked so many in-depth questions, to understand what are the service components that need to sit under each one of those 5 buckets, you'll understand what needs to be in strategy, as an example. So Katie mentioned just then about having a strategic relationship. That's quite a broad term, and I'm sure Katie will articulate this. It's then understanding, so what are you delivering under strategy? What's that part of the service look like? And in some cases, how do you measure it? What does the customer see, hear, and feel? What are you delivering? What are your outputs? What are service measures, etc., etc. So understanding how to break it down is really important. I just want to share a couple of stats which I think are really prevalent to this conversation, because I mentioned at the start that the recruitment industry is suffering and struggling in certain sectors. If you get this right, this is a sector that grew last year by 14%. It is forecasted to grow by a minimum of 14% for the next 9 years. This will take a market from 8 billion to 32 billion in 9 years' time. So when people talk about, what are the growing markets and all the rest of it, yes, there are some, attractive geographical markets. USA has been talked about an awful lot, but from a service proposition perspective and servicing a client locally, which is what Katie's just talked about, which a lot of SME recruiters do, right? this is a great opportunity, but you've got to break the service down, and you've really got to start to understand how you add value. This is not about filling roles. Filling a role is the output of a process that is elongated. And understanding how that process works and taking accountability for it is really, really important. And the last point I'd just say is, as recruiters are notorious for, going towards shiny new toys and gravitating towards it. And I'm as guilty as that as anybody else, by the way. We know from our data that 76% of agency owners are looking at RPO as a means to get some recurring revenue in the business. If my follow-up question was, so what does looking at it mean? Have you got an actual plan? I suspect we're talking at single figures of the amount of business owners that have actually got a plan to do this. And I think this comes back a little bit to what Katie was talking about, which is people see it as the shiny new toy and the golden goose and, the answer to some of the problems. And it is, by the way, but the process to get there needs to be really methodical and structured. This isn't it's easy once you've got your first one over the line, and Katie will not have a need for me ever again, by the way, because she's been there and done it now, got the t-shirt. But getting the first one over the line is really important, because I think that does boost your confidence and give you that reassurance to go on and get your second and third. You're on mute, Christy. I can't. So, Katie, question for me: What were the? We obviously spoke, and then the client approached you. What really were the triggers to make you want to proceed and get your first RPO deal in the business? What were the real hooks?
I think there was an element of timing, because we were kind of on the growth out of a difficult period, and we had some capacity within the business to spend some time on it, because I think we had a conversation with this client in the past few years ago, and we had a very clear business plan at the time, and we wanted to really stay in our lane and stay really, really focused on what we were doing, and we decided it wasn't the right time to pursue it. And then it was better timing, because we had a little bit of capacity to kind of be a bit more open-minded and think, why don't we try something else? So that helped. Clearly the idea of working with a client on a recurring revenue basis was something that was attractive, and something that we'd not really ever managed to do before. Don't get me wrong, we had clients that used us year after year, but it was a different type of relationship. So that was incredibly interesting, and I think just generally being open-minded to trying something different. I think you hit the nail on the head where you said we can be guilty of running towards the next big thing and trying lots of different things without much of a kind of strategy around it. But when we actually looked at the numbers and did a bit of a simple business plan around it, it was a no-brainer, really. So it was a good opportunity to do it for the first time with the right type of client as well. And it was a good client to do it with for the first time.
So that's interesting, Katie. Would that mean that you'd be quite selective in going forward in the future on what clients you would do this with?
Yeah, 100%. It's so important. You've got to have those shared values, and that. I think it really does come down to shared values, because it doesn't really matter what they do or what type of recruitment it is that you're doing for them. The first client that we did it with was an area of recruitment that we'd actually never done before, which goes against everything that you're always told in recruitment. Is stay in your specialism and be networked in your market, but actually it was the fact that we had the shared values, which meant that we could design the solution together and work really, really well together. that was something, a massive learning curve for me, because it kind of went against all my instincts of how you should, grow your business and go into new opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And within that, when you say defining values, I mean, there's obviously values of how you work together. And then there's the values, now we're getting into territory of talking about EVP and, what is that proposition that you're, sharing to future employees for the business? Where does that come into play?
Well, in terms of their EVP, we could tell that they had a really strong employer brand, and that it was going to be really interesting to sort of really push them on that and really work with it. In terms of internally and what we were offering to our team, and what they'd be able to work on, again, it was a completely different, a new job opportunity for one person initially within our team, but more later down the line, to do a different type of job within recruitment. So we moved someone who was doing a contingent role onto this account, and they're now the account manager. And that's given them a massive opportunity to do a completely different type of work that they didn't even know was possible. So yeah, you can look at it from both sides.
And that sounds good from a retention piece as well, in terms of, that, different recruiters, not everybody wants to be, BD, sell. This is almost creating these kind of, like you said, different tracks of careers, but maybe even a retention element on how do you keep them in your business versus maybe they'd be looking for an in-house role or some other kind of different avenue. Yeah,
completely. I mean, we all know people working in our businesses who are really, really great delivery people, and they'll do the sales, but it's not the thing that they're passionate about. Everyone has people like that in their business, and they're really, really important. And this type of work is perfect for those people, because they really care and they do a really, really good job. And it doesn't mean that they're not commercial and they haven't got the ability to, maintain relationships and deepen the relationship with the customer. It's more suited to that type of personality.
Paul, does that, in your kind of years of experience in working with companies on this, does that hold true? Do you have any nuggets to share with that on kind of the people element?
Well, I think what I'd just add, I think Kate is absolutely right. So I think there's three benefactors here in selling RPO services. There's a benefit to the business owner, there's a benefit to the customer, and there's a benefit to the people. So I think, all three parties benefit from RPO solutions, providing it's done properly, by the way. Katie undersold herself a little bit because she'd actually been talking at an event, and that's how she formed the relationship with the CEO, who then eventually some months later sort of reached out to her. So she was in a fortuitous position that she'd sort of bypassed the sales cycle to some extent, and then got this opportunity, panicked, and as we all would do, by the way. I always say that there's two really key components for considering before you progress down this road, and I think one is you've got to be really good at filling jobs, right? You've got to be really well connected, your team really well trained, established team, retention rates high, all that sort of stuff. And Katie does a lot of work in her business around making sure her team are really well trained, but also they're really well looked after as well. So it's that support and challenge being equal. And then the second thing I'd say is having the really good relationships. So in this particular case, Katie had a really good relationship with an external customer, but for any agency thinking about moving into RPO services, you can't do that without some really senior strategic level relationships. And that's hard, right? Because as recruiters, we frequently end up, working with roles on a portal, or end up, interacting with a HR business partner or a recruiter. And that's not going to get us to where we need to be if you want to sell RPO solutions. So one of the bits of work I do, and I know Katie's done as well, is just, part of your initial thought needs to be, have you got the right relationships? And in some cases, you might need to spend a lot of time, maybe 6-12 months, mapping out your customer relationships, segmenting your client base, which I'm a massive fan of, and making sure you've got a really clear plan for developing some relationships. Because, Katie was in a really good position, but since then she's, mapped out, and she's more strategic in terms of looking at her customer base in the local area and having meaningful conversations with them. But for people starting off on this journey, just doing a bit of a sense check about your client relationships, segmenting your client base, really looking at what you deliver, and measuring your customer relationships, I think is so important. Otherwise, what I have seen is people start this journey and then they start to realize that actually they've not got relationships at the right level, and they can't even start the process, and then things stop and start, and frequently it fails, if I'm being brutally honest with you.
Yeah. So are you saying then that this is not an offering that you go out and do new BD on this, or maybe not, definitely not for the initial offset? You need to be looking at where you already have those relationships.
I think there's two ways of doing it. Katie's the I'll say the cheat way, because I'm only saying that not because Katie's a cheat, but it bypasses the process an awful lot. So she was in this really unique position, which is brilliant to be in, by the way. It's utopia, but most people are not in that position. So taking a step back, thinking about what you want, why you're doing this, what do you want to achieve, why is it important, what do you want to deliver by when and how much. I think that strategic bit is really important. And then taking a step back and just going through a really rigorous process is important. And if you think about this, when we train to be a recruiter, we train to follow a process initially, and then once you get good at the process, you can bypass bits, cut bits out, do things differently and everything else. But initially, it's just like follow the process, and then you'll work your own path and your own journey out in terms of how to do it. It's the same with RPO, but you've got to follow the process. But taking a step back in your client relationships, if you haven't got that in place, then I would be saying do not spend any time or money on this until you've got that done and dusted and nailed, and you can evidence it. And there's ways that you can do that around, using thought leadership data, EVP information, thought leadership. There's loads of stuff you can do around that. I've been there, done that in terms of developing relationships. But you've got to have some relationships in the pipeline, because this becomes the initial segue into testing your minimal viable product offering. And if you haven't got those customer relationships, you're going to struggle to get the feedback. You're going to struggle to refine your proposition, and you're going to struggle to know where to go looking straight away. And we always go looking in the backyard first, right? It's just sales 101.
I was actually speaking to an RPO a couple of weeks ago, an established, well-known RPO, and they were saying that even doing new business for them, despite their track record and reputation, it's a hard sell for new business. So they've actually created almost like, I call it a gateway product. What are those entry points you could get into companies, prove yourself with them? This is, of course, if it's a new business, that you're going after. Prove yourself on kind of that lower value, literally lower price value offering. And then it might be a 6 or 12 month lead time before they would then entrust you to take on, kind of the full outsourcing side of it.
Yeah. And that for me, Christy, has always been the segue into building relationships, right? So, I've used data, thought leadership, market insights, intelligence, trying to help people understand how to solve the business problems, really from a HRD perspective, which is where a lot of my relationships were developed. But I think about one of the last RPOs I sold was for a company called Collinson's, who run all the airport lounges. I used a relationship to refer me into the global HRD. So, referrals, use referrals. We don't use referrals really well, by the way, in recruitment. So, look at where you got relationships, use a referral, Simon Young sponsored me into Bertie Tonks, had a meeting with Bertie Tonks, and just shared thought leadership. Shared what was going on in the world of work, what was going to happen in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, what organisations were finding easy, what were they finding hard, what HRD should be really thinking about and planning for the future. He enjoyed his meeting so much, he cancelled his second meeting. So instead of getting an hour with him, I got 2. And then that became, it was a 9-month process from sort of planting the seed around talent and talent management to him then saying, I'm going to do something. And we had to go through a process, it's had to work really hard, but I was on the front foot because I developed that relationship with all that insights, thought leadership, early doors. But, I never turned to a customer and did a service review in the traditional sense, because you'd spend 80% of the time looking at what you're doing and asking them about what they were doing going forward and just saying, basically, can I have some vacancies? This was about a high level conversations with business owners, HRDs around the world of work and things that's going on. And, they want to know what's going on. They want to know what the competitors are doing. They want to know what's happening with the latest version of Copilot, as an example. So all these sorts of things they want to know. And when you work in-house, you sometimes struggle to get access to that information externally.
Yeah. We do have a bit of a question, more of a statement, but I'm turning it into a question. Giles shares that, it has become a question. He was saying that he's a business owner whose services are retained search, contingency, some market mapping, interested in RPO. So his question is, what are the typical trigger points that would suggest a client might be interested in pursuing an RPO agreement or service provider?
Great question. Katie, do you want to give that a go? Do you want me to go?
Feel free to go.
I think it's a great question. What are the trigger points? I think the trigger points will usually, from my experience, be dependent upon what conversations you trigger. So I'm going to flip this the other way around a little bit, because I've rarely been in a situation when a HR director is going, Paul, I need to outsource my recruitment. Normally, it's through having those conversations around what's going on in the workplace, what's going on in the world of work, thought leadership and everything else, that somebody will then say, oh, now you've mentioned that, I think actually I've got that problem, or I've got the same challenge that you've just mentioned. So what other organizations are doing, or what would you recommend? And it's just having those conversations. If you're meeting a customer and you're talking about the vacancies you filled and what vacancies they might have for the next 6 months, for me, I just think that's pointless. That just makes you a transactional supplier that can be replaced at any point in time. So I think it's about taking ownership. What's really interesting is, and I can't remember the exact stat, but the number of people, business owners, that sit down and do a formal meeting with their customers each year, it's really low. So as a recruitment agency owner, if there's one thing you can do to stand out from the crowd, is just have one formal meeting with your customer every year and talk about thought leadership, the world of work and all the rest of it, and you'll be way ahead of the vast majority of the other recruiters in the UK. And that's a fact.
Yeah. I attended this is now 2 years ago, so different market situation, and I'm going to caveat with that, but I attended the in-house recruiter conference. And it amazed me, just not just the session topics, but the discussions I was having with all these in-house recruiters was, they're not really recruiting, from succession planning strategies and retention strategies, and DE&I, of course, being very, very, very high on the agenda. And I realized, 24 months on, literally 24 months on, budgets have been pulled. They're being, forced into doing more direct recruiting, et cetera, themselves. But in-house recruiters, the point I'm trying to make, they are being tasked with so many various projects that the actual recruiting, not that it should become secondary, but they frankly don't have time for it half the time. So some of those pain points we're talking about, what are the triggers? Those programs are taking up their time, and that in itself is a trigger.
100%.
The other point I was going to paraphrase from Giles' question, when he was saying he does primarily retained contingency and some market mapping. Is there, obviously there's also now exclusive, there's retained, there's contract, there's temp, you know, all the different kind of forms of recruitment. Is there an ideal kind of makeup of who would be the ideal agency candidate that would be best suited to move into this space? Is it more a temp recruitment play? Is it a perm? Is it, what does that look like?
Well, there's different models. So obviously we're talking about RPO. If you take the staffing industry analyst definition of RPO, then it's perm recruitment, and MSP, managed service programs, is contingent. So I think the same principle applies, which is if you've got the right level, if you're really good at filling jobs, whether it be temp, contract, or perm, and you've got the right level relationships, you can offer some form of a outsourced service recruitment solution, whether it be in perm or contingent and temp. So I think this comes down to, as I said right from the start, which is just your level of relationships. And I think that you just mentioned one of the bigger RPO providers. From my experience, Christy, when I was head of UK sales for Adecco, you know, one of the frustrations that I had is that the sales directors, who were brilliant, by the way, but they would literally be sat waiting for a bid to come in, or for somebody to be, you know, for an organization to approach them. Because when you work for one of these big providers, the brand is so strong, you don't naturally have to do business development. You just have to be good at managing the sales process. And some of them are brilliant, by the way, so I'm not knocking it. But when you're a small independent, or you're a Cummins Mellor like Katie is, your brand isn't known for doing this. So you've got to go out there and you've got to trigger these conversations. And again, you've just got to be really, really good at filling jobs and having the right level relationships. So I don't think that whether you offer perm or contingent is important. But what Giles mentions there is does a little bit of work around sort of market mapping. That is a key segue in, because that is in that strategic sort of column about market mapping. And I don't mean market mapping in a contingent recruitment sense. I mean market mapping more from a internal looking out sense. That's a great segue in, because that a lot of people just don't do that. We talk about talent pooling, and I'm sure Katie will back me up here. Talent pooling from when you work for a recruitment agency perspective is not talent pooling when you do RPO. It's like totally different. It's like salt and pepper. Honestly, it's completely different.
I think something interesting that's come out of us being open to working with clients in this way is that we've worked with a client more recently who we haven't done a full sort of outsourced RPO for them, but what we have done is we've done some market mapping with them, and we worked with them on a number of what they call hard to fill roles on a retained basis. And part of the service that we offered was conducting that market mapping and setting up talent pools for them for the future. And it was just the idea of, redesigning our offering and enhancing the service that we were already providing, and taking elements of the RPO solution and just tailoring it to that particular client for what they needed and what they could afford at the time. But it's really kind of elevated the quality of the experience that they've had with a recruiter. So to go from that to then going back to working on a completely contingent basis where they just pay the agency if they fill the job, there's no comparison. They couldn't go back now, because it's the level of attention, the quality of the service they get with this kind of superior product is you can't compare. So it's just made us be more creative and open-minded to what we can actually offer to clients and what we can package together as well.
So what's happening there, if you take a step back, is you're hitting the trust stage in the relationship, and because they're asking you to do more things than contingent labour. So if you get exclusivity, you're starting to shift the relationship. People are trusting you. So once you hit that trust stage, and you Katie, you'll be familiar with my 5 channels in that client relationship bit. You're in the middle. Once you hit that trust level, that's the point to start turning up the dial and either ask for more exclusivity, more other recruitment services, and better talent, RPO, whatever else it might be. That is absolutely the trigger point. That's really interesting.
And you know what excites me about the RPO space, and obviously I'm coming from a marketing standpoint. I'm coming from creating that value, that employer brand, that recruitment marketing. How do you bake in marketing to help attract as well as retain the talent. But ultimately, you're creating something of real substance that's really tangible, that chances are that client will not want to be still, there may be a shelf life. You may not be doing this 3 or 5 years down the line, but you really have, or it might have evolved in that time for that one client. At some point, they're going to want to probably take it back. But you've now created this really incredible piece of value for them. It could be engaged talent pools that are engaged with that company. It could be that EVP and employer brand. It could be setting up the processes they've just never had the bandwidth to achieve, or the skill set, or the vision to set up. Like you really are creating, something of substance, that a legacy of sorts that you're handing over. Guys, we are right at time. If there's no other questions from the group, I'm going to pass it back over to each of you to maybe just kind of parting thoughts. If there was kind of one thing you'd suggest for people on this call or on this live to take away, what would that be? Katie, do you want to start?
I think I'll just take the opportunity to just build on the point you were saying about marketing and the opportunities that it gives you, because it is quite hard to sometimes measure the value of marketing activity in any business. But actually, just to share a little anecdote and expand on what Paul was saying about how we actually secured that first client, we entered some awards and we won an award around candidate experience, and created an excellent candidate experience within your business. And this was a few years ago. And, entering awards falls under the marketing category. And, it was a decision that we made that we wanted to try and win so we could get some exposure, and we won. And then as a result of that, I got invited to speak at an event about excellent candidate experience. And then that's where I met the contact that then turned into this relationship. Okay. And I think sometimes it's quite easy to sort of dismiss those opportunities, and when you get invited to things, to say no, I can't do it, or I'm busy, or I'm not really sure the return on that. But if I'd have said no to that opportunity, that speaking opportunity, then I wouldn't have the relationship that I've got with this client. So I think it's just saying yes to things, and just going, and even if you're not quite sure what you're going to get out of it, you always get something. And it is the senior people in your business who are going to be able to have this level of conversations with the clients. So it's using those senior people, the MD or wherever else you've got available to you, to get out into the market and get building those relationships with existing clients or new clients, because this isn't going to happen, like you said, Christy, off a random BD call with a line manager. This is going to happen with, a senior person within a client. So you need to use your senior people in your business to get out into the market and start talking about this stuff.
Awesome. Love that, Katie. Paul, any parting thoughts for everyone?
Yeah, I think, don't be one of the 76% of owners that are considering this and do absolutely nothing with it. I think that's an absolute waste. I think coming back to Katie's point, which, she mentioned at the start, don't have imposter syndrome. Reach out and get some help, like Katie did, early doors. Start understanding the process, the language a little bit, just in terms of how to position and frame things, and the processes and methodologies that you can use to do this. There's help out there, and I swear, once you've done your first one, you will need minimal help once you've got the first one over the line, because you'll have that confidence, and you'll realize that actually it's not hard, but sometimes it is a mindset shift. And I get sometimes mindset shifts can be hard, but once you start using somebody as a sounding board or an expert, and they're challenging your thought process, you will start to see the world through a different pair of eyes. And I think that's really important, because we've got to change position. We've got to move from being a recruiter to being an internal business partner, and that's a mindset shift, is that, and that can only happen with some help.
Brilliant. Well, that is us for today. That was possibly the fastest 44 minutes and 22 seconds going. But if any of this is interesting to anyone, this is only the part one of two-part series. And this was meant to be kind of that high level umbrella, or not umbrella, helicopter view over, the art of the possible. But we're going to do another session exactly 1 week today with this same group of experts on the actual how to, literally day 1, day 2, day 3, how do we get started on this? So hopefully we will see you there. Thanks everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.